I'll never forget the day we set out on our ill-fated expedition to the Ural Mountains. Our group of 9 experienced hikers was filled with excitement and anticipation. We had been planning this trip for months, and finally we were here, ready to take on the challenge. As we ascended higher into the mountains, the weather began to deteriorate. The winds howled, and the snow fell thick and fast. We struggled to make progress, but our experienced guide Igor led the way with confidence. On the night of February, we set up camp on the slope of the mountain. The wind was fierce, and the tent fabric creaked and groaned under the pressure. I remember feeling a sense of unease, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. The next morning, we woke to find that one of our group members, Yuri, was missing. We searched the surrounding area, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As the days passed, more and more of our group members began to disappear. We were left with no choice but to abandon our expedition and flee the mountain. It wasn't until weeks later, when the bodies of my friends were found, that the true horror of what had happened became clear. They had died under mysterious circumstances, with strange injuries that none of us could explain. To this day, I am haunted by the memories of that fateful expedition. The Ural Mountains had claimed the lives of my friends, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I'll never forget the night of June. My family and I had just moved into our new home. We were excited to start our new life in this small, peaceful town. As we settled in for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house seemed to creak and groan, and I could have sworn I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. The next morning, I woke to find that my entire family had been brutally murdered with an axe. I was the only survivor, and I was left to pick up the pieces. The investigation that followed was one of the most extensive in Iowa history. The police collected evidence, interviewed suspects, and followed leads, but the killer was never caught. To this day, I am haunted by the memories of that fateful night. The sound of the axe striking, the screams of my family, and the feeling of utter helplessness are etched into my mind forever. I know I was lucky enough to not die, but it still raises some questions. Why was I saved? Some of the questions will remain a mystery. I still remember the day we moved into our new home like it was yesterday. It was supposed to be a fresh start for my family and me, a chance to leave our old lives behind and create new memories. But little did we know, our dream home would soon turn into a living hell. At first, it was just small things. Doors would creak open by themselves, and we'd hear strange noises in the night. I'd wake up to the sound of footsteps outside my room, but whenever I went to investigate, there'd be no one there. My parents dismissed it as the typical creaks and groans of an old house, but I knew what I heard. As time went on, the occurrences became more frequent and more intense. We'd hear voices whispering in the night, and shadowy figures would dart around the corners of our eyes. It was as if the house was alive, and it was determined to drive us out. I'd find myself waking up in the middle of the night, paralyzed with fear, as an unseen presence loomed over me. It wasn't until we'd been living in the house for a few months that we discovered its dark history. A mass murder had taken place there just a year before we moved in. A family had been brutally slaughtered in their beds, and it seemed that the spirits of the victims were still lingering. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched by unseen eyes, that the ghosts of the dead were waiting for us to join them. We tried to ignore the paranormal activity, to tell ourselves it was just our imagination playing tricks on us, but it only seemed to get worse. Doors would slam shut on their own, and objects would move around the house as if possessed. I'd find strange symbols etched into the walls, and the air would be thick. In the end, we were forced to flee our home, leaving behind the horrors that lurked within its walls. Looking back, I realized just how traumatic that experience was for me and my family. We thought we'd found our dream home, but it turned out to be a nightmare. The memories of those terrifying events still haunt me to this day, a reminder that some houses are better left unoccupied.